This is WEFT Champaign, 90.1 FM, community radio for East Central Illinois. Streaming live at www.weft.org. The following program is pre-recorded and consists of two parts. The first part is a rebroadcast of a program first aired in 2011. The second part was recorded in November 2014. Welcome to Weekend Heartbeat. I'm Sean David, and this is A New Lamp.
New lamp for old. New lamp for old. Remember how Aladdin headed out to get oil for his mother's old dented, tarnished lamp? And in the market he met a magician calling out these words. This strange man was offering to give him a brand new shiny lamp for his old one. That's what I want to offer you, if you'll have it. A new lamp of spiritual guidance. But maybe you already have such a lamp, which still burns brightly. Great! You are still welcome to join us simply to learn who we are. But maybe your lamp of divine guidance has gotten dented and tarnished like Aladdin's. Or perhaps you have no such lamp at all. To you, I offer a new lamp. Hi, my name is Marilyn. Welcome to A New Lamp, a program designed to make you acquainted with the Baha'i religious faith. I hope you will choose to spend the next few minutes with me. Thanks. Hello again. I finished last week's program by saying we would talk about progressive revelation, and so we shall. The essential truth of the divine religions is one truth and springs from one eternal source. Each new religion has two objectives. The first is to reaffirm the truth of the one and only God, and to remind us of how we are to treat one another. These two essentials never change. However, as humankind has progressed over many millennia, so the requirements of each age have changed. Today's world does not even begin to resemble the world of 4,000 years ago. So the rules become outdated and need upgraded to meet the needs of the present time. These are the roles of the manifestations of God, to reinforce the essentials and update the non-essential laws. The universe and everything therein is in cycles, wheels within wheels, always moving and progressing. A simple illustration is the seasons, winter to spring, spring to summer, and so on. Rebirth, full flowering, deterioration, dormancy. So with religions. Each one has struggled to take its place in the world, its founders and followers persecuted. But growth takes place until it becomes the regeneration, or resurrection, if you will, of the spiritual world to mankind. Centuries pass and the enthusiasm wanes as it gets less of a struggle, taken for granted, reinterpreted, superstitions rise, and then comes the decline. Then comes the next manifestation of God, to once again suffer, to revive the spirit of mankind with the holy fragrances of a new spiritual flowering. This we refer to as progressive revelation. Each messenger of God, before leaving this world, promises that another will come in due course of time. All the messengers of God are imbued with the same Spirit. Each reveal to us the true nature of God to the extent that we mortals are able to comprehend. The names are different, but the spirit and purpose always the same, to return us to a compassionate God and revive the spiritual life of mankind. By the way, please understand that the use of such words as man or mankind is simply because our English language does not have adequate gender-neutral words and is clumsy in that regard. I am always referring to both male and female unless it is obvious that I'm referring to one or the other. So, who have been the manifestations of God? They include Abraham, Moses, Buddha, Zoroaster, Christ, Muhammad, and others through unrecorded history. For whom are you waiting? The Messiah if you are Jewish, the return of the Buddha, the return of Christ if you are Christian or Muslim. May I present to you Baha'u'llah, the fulfillment of all prophecy, the promised one of all the ages. Ya Baha'u'llah, thou glory of the all-glorious. The sun of reality, like the material sun, has numerous risings and dawning places. One day it rises from the zodiacal sign of Cancer. Another day from the sign of Libra or Aquarius. Another time it is from the sign of Aries as it diffuses its rays. But the sun is one sun and one reality. The people of knowledge are lovers of the sun and are not fascinated by the places of its rising and dawning. The people of perception are seekers of the truth and not the places of its appearance nor of its dawning points. Therefore, they will adore the sun from whatever point in the zodiac it may appear, and they will seek the reality in every sanctified soul who manifests it. Abdu'l-Baha. Thanks so much for being with me this morning. I hope you have found a blessing during these few minutes. If you want to learn more about the Baha'i religion, you can go online to www.bahai.us. To contact me, my email address is anewlamp@yahoo.com. Thanks, and have a great day. Good afternoon, and welcome back to this portion of A New Lamp. Hey, Sean, look who our guests are today.
Hey, it's my mom and dad. Hi, Mom and Dad.
Hello.
That's right. We welcome Sean's parents, Joan and Carlton Mills. We're so delighted to have you with us today.
Oh, we're glad to be here. Being Sean's parents, we have a lot to answer for.
Haven't been on the radio since my college days.
Well, you two have such an interesting history. But first, let's hear a little bit from each of you about the early part of your lives. Where you hail from? Let's start with Joan.
I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. I studied mathematics and chemistry in undergraduate school at Spelman College in Atlanta, and math and statistics and educational psychology in graduate school. My job had me working with the university computers early on, and I studied horticulture at Parkland College. I like plants. But my real love is ancient history, including archaeology, metaphysics, and of course, religion.
You've got a lot of good interests there, Joan. So you started originally from Atlanta and somehow or other ended up here in Urbana and found the Baha'i faith.
I continued attending services at the Adventist Church, the Presbyterian Church, the Methodist, and Vineyard later after I came here. When I didn't find what I was looking for in these churches, they are really quite a bit alike. I meditated with the Buddhists, studied with the spiritualists, and taught at the School of Metaphysics after studying their program. I found in late high school, early college, it was more interesting to read metaphysics and world religions than learning the latest dance steps. In those days, before internet, you had to be reading or mixing with people going out to find out these things. To make a long story shorter, my girlfriend who liked religion and philosophy helped me get a scholarship to do junior year abroad. And her one letter to me said she had found Baha'i. Well, I got home. My girlfriend who wrote the letter still didn't tell me much, except that there was a teaching meeting in a white neighborhood, I believe near Emory University, and she loaned me a book, a difficult-to-read book. I was glad when I could get to the Black Baha'i Center in a black neighborhood near Martin Luther King Jr. Church. The next thing I knew, my girlfriend was a Baha'i. She married a white Baha'i man who became a college professor. I went to that teaching meeting once or twice, and although it was a little icy, I did go to an out-of-town Baha'i gathering riding in an integrated car, which my dad thought was a really dangerous thing to do. This was in early 1963. Sit-ins were going on in Atlanta under M.L. King Jr., but I was already fully integrated. When I came to Illinois for grad school, I thought I'd try the Adventists one more time. I found the address in the phone book. I rode my bike. It took a lot longer than I allowed, and I arrived late. They directed the latecomers into a mother's balcony that was soundproof and on an intercom system. After about half an hour, the sound went out. That was my sign I should go. I didn't need to listen to any more preachers that all sounded alike if I didn't want to. I could go where there were many books written by the Baha'i founders. Maybe I could finally get more spiritual answers and ride in integrated cars that didn't scare me.
So we've found the Baha'i faith and found that it was integrated. So, Carlton, let's hear a little bit about your early life.
I'm sort of the opposite. I grew up on a farm in northwest Illinois, which is a part of Illinois that has hills and is not flat. Wisconsin sort of sticks itself in. I actually went to a one-room schoolhouse for my first 8 years of schooling. And my high school had 125, 130 students, and my graduating class was like 25. But even though it was a tiny school out there, you could still take Latin. The Latin teacher quit about the same time I graduated, and they never replaced him. But I got a reasonable high school education. I came down here studying agricultural engineering and got interested in computers. And I had a friend, a Baha'i friend, in my rooming house who was sort of insistent that I come to some of the meetings and things. So I became involved with the Baha'is that way. And I thought, at the time, I was pretending to be an atheist.
Okay.
But I actually accepted Baha'u'llah, I think, sort of instinctively. But it was difficult to overcome the Christian background or prejudice of that Jesus is somehow totally distinct from all the other messengers. I grew up in a Presbyterian environment, and they were not narrow-minded or dogmatic really, but you absorb the reality from their point of view.
Right.
The only thing that was which may have helped getting me to be a Baha'i was I was in our communicants class at the church. My father was on the session, which is a governing body in the Presbyterian Church. And so session members were supposed to go and watch the final exam of the communicants before they joined the church. And they could ask questions. So my father asked a question to the effect of, well, if Christ has brought a new covenant, does that mean you don't have to obey the Ten Commandments?
Your father asked this.
My father asked that, which was
interesting
the
question.
first time, I think, in the whole communicant class experience that there was anything with any intellectual value. And the minister sort of made some blah, blah, blah thing to avoid actually discussing the implications of that. But that may have just stuck around and caused me to be more accepting of Baha'u'llah when I heard about it. And I spent like a summer sort of in agony because I wanted to be a Baha'i, I felt I should become a Baha'i because Baha'u'llah was who he said he was. So I knew that, and it was my duty to do that. But that would require that I at least pretend to be, a responsible adult. And I was just turning 21, and I felt it was time for me to sow some wild oats. And this would end up the sowing of wild oats. So finally, in September, I declared at a meeting in Champaign. And that Sunday, Joan declared. After some of the meetings, I asked Joan to go to have coffee and pie on Goodwin, near where in restaurants where the Cranert Center Performing Arts are.
Ah, okay.
And so that's when we started to get to know each other. And something happened, and which I don't quite understand, but the next June we were married. So
Something happened
something
he doesn't
happened.
understand.
Yeah, right.
Isn't that interesting? Well, now this really is interesting. We've got a black lady from the big town of Atlanta in the Deep South and a white man from rural northern Illinois. So, okay, you've explained to us how you met. You've had some pretty exciting times. So, when this happened, back in the 60s, it was a time of racial crisis in this country, which was a pretty daring move on your parts. Did you run into a lot of trouble because of your mixed racial relationship? How did your families respond?
Her father sent a letter up saying that he'd never met a good white man yet,
Oh,
but that maybe this is the one God put in his path.
how interesting.
Joan's family sent Joan's sister up to find out just what kind of weird mess their daughter had got into up here at the big U of I. There's different opinions about whether she was really a spy or not. But
If you have something to say, Mom, go ahead and speak up.
We have this script, and he's not following it. He's already skipped one of my speeches, and he's about to skip a second one.
Oh, uh-oh.
yeah.
And
And
how,
Sandy did come up to see what was going on, right? Am I totally? No, she came up. Yeah, she came up.
Yeah, I think she came up for a visit before she came up to stay for a semester,
Yeah, right.
which was shortly after.
But was she up here to spy? My mom's rolling her eyes.
just checking things out, kind of?
She never let on. She was just enjoying a vacation. Probably the first time she left home by herself.
Mm-hmm.
She's 8 years younger than me. No.
So she was in her teens then, probably.
Yeah.
Probably in high school.
Yeah. So, Carlton, how did your family respond?
They were okay. Initially, they sort of had to be okay for psychological reasons because they knew there was nothing. Everybody was human and created by God. And I, being young and crazy, told them I was bringing a girl home, but I didn't for them to meet. But I did not tell them that the girl was black. And so they met me in Savannah, Illinois, as we get off the train, and here comes this girl I brought from the university, and she was black. But they were cool, and I don't think anybody, really said anything about it. I asked my mother what she thought of Joan, and she said, well, the kids like her, which was she was a mother who really liked children. I'm the oldest of 10, and so for every 2 years we had a new baby. And so somebody who gets the highest praise you could get, other than getting an A in Latin, which I don't think I ever did, was to be a good baby tender. And so Joan's instincts to cuddle up with the children was absolutely the right thing to do.
Oh, hey, how about that? So essentially, both of your families accepted what could have been a big problem. Yep. So you both became Baha'is about the same time?
Yeah, actually the same time.
Oh, okay. In the Baha'i community, what was their reaction to the mixed marriage situation?
I didn't realize it at the time, but they looked at it as a positive thing, that And it is part of the faith that to have diverse marriages of diverse backgrounds from different parts of the world and different classes. And at the very beginning here in the United States, a black lawyer, Louis Gregory, married an English Baha'i with the absolute blessings of the son of Abdu'l Baha. And that sort of settled the race question for the Baha'is in the United States.
Right.
When that happened around the time of World War I.
I have a question, Joan, I was kind of curious about. You said that when you were still in the South and you went to a Baha'i meeting, that it was a black meeting. Was that typical at that time?
Well, the laws, this was before the sit-ins, or before the sit-ins had any effect, and the laws did not condone too much
Okay,
interaction, except maybe servants.
right.
Um,
So it would have been asking for trouble to be integrated at that time.
that's what my dad thought, and it didn't occur to me, except after he spoke, then I started to get more cautious. But I had been to meetings in the white neighborhood before. I went to a Quaker meeting that was an ongoing every week study group in the Quaker house that was across town. So being in Martin Luther King's neighborhood, church neighborhood, was well thought of place to be. This was not in the boonies. This was not a peripheral thing, and this was a special place to be there. There was a white community. I never met them. When my dad found out I had joined Baha'i, he went directly to the white community and got to know some of those people and joined up and became and stayed Baha'i for the rest of his life.
Oh
And
my goodness, I
one of
never
the-
knew that, John.
Representative of the Baha'i community came to his funeral.
Wow.
So he didn't deal with the black community, but I liked the singing. And I had met my friend's friend, the friend who had been helping me all along, had a friend who was this pianist. And she could just play anything she had heard. And she made that black meeting really special. I didn't want to find anything else. In fact, it sort of reminded me of going to the Adventist church when I was in summer school between undergrad and graduate school in another state, not my home and not Illinois. And I went to the white Adventist church, and it was as if I was invisible.
Oh, goodness.
Nobody spoke to me except this one young mother who invited me to her house, and she fed me and her children peanut butter sandwiches. I thought that was kind of neat,
That is neat.
but race relations were very strange.
Yes, I'm sure it has to have been. And Joan, you had a friend that introduced you to the faith?
Yes, this was a friend from high school. We like to talk kind of philosophical, metaphysical baby talk, really. I mean, we didn't know anything. She knew that I was interested in religion. So when she found out about Baha'i, she wrote to me, because we were in separate towns at the time, and told me that when I came home, she would tell me about Baha'i. And it's funny, she literally never told me anything about Baha'i. It's cute. But she gave me a book, or loaned me a book. It was very difficult to read.
Okay.
I didn't get it. But I knew there were books now. There were lots of books, I've been told, and I was ready to find all of them.
All right.
So I found a book that really drew me in, that was taking off where the Adventists had left off, describing the biblical prophecies of the return.
Right.
And and it was written by a Baha'i who was very vocal. He was into radio and very interesting. And I absorbed that book. It just confirmed what I had been studying, what I'd been learning, what I'd been hoping about religion. And when I got to Urbana and explored the Urbana Baha'i Center, they had shelves of books. And I started collecting. I was a student. I didn't have a lot of money. But then books were a lot cheaper in those days.
Right. Everything was a lot cheaper in those days.
And they had some lending materials.
That's great. And today, as we're recording, we're sitting in a Baha'i library. So this is pretty neat.
Yeah. Right. That book was by Bill Sears.
Yeah.
Oh, is that the book?
And I can't think of the name right now.
Thief in the
Thief
Night.
in the Night?
Thief in the Night. Yeah, Thief in the Night, which is about prophecy.
I think a lot of people have come into the faith because of reading Bill Sears' book, A Thief in the Night.
Yep.
Or the, what is it, the
Right.
the Thief in the Night?
Case of the Missing Millennium.
That's what it is, right. Okay, the first part of our program today was about progressive revelation. To me, when I learned about this Baha'i belief, it just seemed so logical, like almost obvious. Why doesn't everybody know this? How did this affect your decision to become a Baha'i? Was it a new idea to you, the idea of progressive revelation, that there's have been messengers from God periodically?
I accepted it without paying much attention to the name. Like in my memory, people started using the words progressive revelation a few years after I became a Baha'i. It's probably not true. It's just a matter of faulty memory. But once you accept Baha'u'llah, then you have accepted progressive revelation because you've accepted this idea that we're moving forward, and that this is the time of the end, but it's also the new beginning, and that the Lord's Prayer, where we will, Thy will be done, Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That's part of the process that a Baha'i endeavors to advance.
Yes, and those of us who have come from Christian background are aware of the idea of the golden age, the millennium, that is supposed to be one of peace, and so this is. And it all makes sense,
right.
doesn't
it? That's sort of a universal. Other religions have the same kind of vision for the future.
Yes.
And the previous prime minister of Iran, when he spoke at the United Nations, always ended up speaking about the coming Mahdi, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, who would lead the world to peace and to justice.
Mm-hmm. Yes, he did.
And so, at the same time, he's trying to get rid of the Baha'i faith because he thinks it's not a religion. But he is talking about the same as the Lord's Prayer. He's talking about the future.
That's right.
He's just, slightly off.
How about you, Joan? Did you find progressive revelation an interesting concept, or did that make sense to you?
Well, given that I had been studying with the Buddhists, I read about other religions, and it seemed perfectly reasonable that they were all inspired by divine teachers at some level, and we know that Jesus was a Jew, so that his background, his early teachings from his family were all Judaism, and so that was his launching pad, so to speak, to become the teacher of Christianity.
Right.
He couldn't have done that without a background. And of course, we probably also know that Buddha was born into Hinduism.
Right.
So these teachers are launched by their parent religion, so
That's
that
a good way to put it.
they can go ahead and go further than that because of their divine inspiration that they get as a manifestation.
So this has been interesting. Carlton, in our religion, the Baha'i faith, we don't have any clergy. Now, doesn't this kind of lead to everything being a bit at loose ends? I mean, how can we function that way? Can you give us a description of how the faith is kept together? What sense of organization prevents it from just falling apart?
Well, when Joan and I became a Baha'i in 1963, the administrative, what the Baha'is call the administrative order, which is an embryo of what will develop over the coming centuries, was quite simple. The affairs of a community were governed by a local spiritual assembly, and it was elected by the members of that community. It was 9 people. The affairs of a nation were directed by a national spiritual assembly, another group of 9 people. And in 1963, just 3 or 4 months before we became Baha'i, the Universal House of Justice was elected for the first time. And that's another 9 people that are working on the affairs of the world. And the Universal House of Justice is referred to by Baha'u'llah. He spoke of Baha'u'llah. Baha'u'llah spoke of the Universal House of Justice, and he explicitly deferred decisions to the Universal House of Justice. People would ask him questions, and Baha'u'llah said that it would be decided in the future. That there were things, administrative kind of things, that he refused to say anything about. He said that will be taken care of in the future. So we've always been sort of a future-leaning community. We've always been building something. What's going on is imperfect and not good enough, and we are in the process of replacing it with something better. And we're doing our best not to encumberment with the bad ideas of our current civilization. So the big thing when you look at it, say from a sociological point of view, is one, there is no administrative authority given to an individual. So there is nothing like a pastor or a priest or a high priest or a imam that has authority to compel people to do things. There's no individual that has that. All authority, administrative authority, resides in the spiritual assemblies. And that in itself is sort of distinct from the world.
Yes.
The world, we want people to, the president appoints czars to do this and that, and we want individuals to actually do things, and then we want to yell at the individual and make his life as difficult as possible. And if it doesn't work out well, then we want to say, "I told you so."
And we want a cult of personality also.
Right. Yes.
We want to have an individual that we look to lead us, to be our conscience for us.
Right.
And that's something that with 9 elected individuals, it doesn't really work that way.
Right.
You also have, if the preacher didn't say to do it that way, then you don't have to. It's not required. You don't have to use your own brain to realize you shouldn't be bad-mouthing your neighbor.
Right.
So we are all responsible then.
We're responsible for our own spiritual development and behavior, and authorities help in their way. They make, like, this Baha'i Center available because no one person could have done this in the Baha'i Center, in the Baha'i community here. We're not that rich. We're not that powerful. We're just working together to make something happen. And the more Baha'is we get, the more helpers there are going to be, and it'll be wonderful.
Oh, won't it though?
Right. But accompanying this is the process of creating these institutions.
Yeah.
The traditional thing is you can go in an organization and you can find, if you're ambitious, you can find a path to get to the top. And if you want to do something, you create a little clique to support you in doing whatever it is you want to have done to fix things up. In the Baha'i faith, the local spiritual assemblies, we gather on a Baha'i holy day, we say prayers, people write down the names of the 9 people they think most qualified. And the qualifications include such things as a well-trained mind, disciplined people, who are the competent people, and you vote for them. There are no nominations, there are no speeches, and the process itself sort of causes the people who want to make speeches and move themselves up the hierarchy are, rejected. They get pushed out at every election because the electors are going to say, well, somebody that egotistical, I don't want him or her. And the process also makes you have diversity of people on the assembly because you're choosing 9 people rather than just 1. And the basic rule is if there is a tie and one of the people is a member minority, the person on the minority is always put on. You don't have to have a vote to break the tie in that case.
That's interesting, isn't it?
So that sort of symbolically places the idea of protecting the interests of the minority, making sure that the minority doesn't feel that they're being shoved out.
Right.
But there comes with that what we as citizens of the community have to do. We have to accept the decisions of the assembly and support them. The same as the members of the assembly, if it's not unanimous, when they vote and decide, that decision is the decision of the assembly, and everyone is honor-bound to support that. So there are no minority positions. There are no splitting into groups fighting things out and saying, well, that was a dumb decision and those people who voted that way didn't know what they were doing. Well, it's possible they didn't know what they were doing. But within the Baha'i system, everybody's honor-bound to support the decision. If it doesn't work out, it can be fixed. And because you have not gone and stuck your ego and tied your ego to what turns out to have been a bad decision, it makes it easier to change, to correct it.
How often are these assemblies elected?
Once a year. And same for the National Spiritual Assemblies. The Universal House of Justice is elected every 5 years, and the electors for the Universal House of Justice are the National Spiritual Assembly members.
Okay.
And the headquarters of the Baha'i Faith is in Haifa in Israel. So every 5 years, there's about 170 spiritual assemblies around the world. So every 5 years, the people of Haifa get to see, 10,000 Baha'is coming from all over the world, some of whom have never been on an airplane before. But they were elected to the National Spiritual Assembly, and so now they're coming to Haifa for the International Convention and to vote. And when they vote, everybody wears their native costumes. So it's interesting to watch the newsreels of, you'll have a headhunter, you'll have somebody from Indonesia, you have, Indians.
I trust they're not still heading it.
No, but you hope. Right, yes, right. But you will, meet Baha'is that say, well, my families were headhunters. But the same principles abide, that there's no electioneering. The members of the House of Justice just sort of disappear, and you don't see them until the vote. There's no statements made by anybody. There are, in the meetings, people will be designated who are not members of the Universal House of Justice to greet them or to make a certain talk or do something. But then once the Universal House of Justice is elected, then all of a sudden they're out and they're greeting their old friends. And
Sure.
What is really interesting is that you can still think of them as friends. I've been on a first name basis with like 3 members of the House of Justice over the last half century.
Wow.
And it's unfortunately I didn't have my camera, but at a Baha'i school in Flint, Michigan, we give people duties, service. You have to do service. So you have to, on Saturday, people between A and H, they clean up and do the tables at noon, and then the other half cleans up the tables after the evening meal. And I was there and I looked over, and there's a member of the Universal House of Justice doing his duty, and he was cleaning off the tables.
Everybody on the same
everybody,
level.
but and he wasn't being ostentatious about it. And it wasn't,
Right.
because other times they'll crowd around his table and ask questions, so he doesn't
Sure.
have any chance to do it. He just spends his time with the friends. But I,
Well,
Yep.
thank you so much for explaining all this, Carlton. This is really interesting, and you've given us a good account of how the Baha'i faith is organized. So, Joan and Carlton, we've learned about how you met, about your early background, how you became Baha'is. Okay, anything else we need to know about your marriage or your family?
we had 4 children. One was adopted, and the other 3 came the old-fashioned way. Um,
So, Sean,
Mm-hmm.
your dad mentioned that, 3 of you are born of your mother,
Right.
and the 4th one has been adopted.
That's right.
Tell
Yeah,
me.
my older brother, Bobby, he's a electrician in town. My sisters both live in Geneva, Illinois. Kathy is
school nurse.
she's a school nurse. Yes, I was trying to remember if she was still working there at the school. She's had a long career as a nurse, and she's worked in various settings. Before she was a school nurse, she was a labor and delivery nurse.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Rana is now living in Geneva also with her daughter. And Rana's working for the...
She does the produce for an upscale grocery store. And you go in and look at it, and she's got the stacks of apples looking beautiful. And she has a little knife she carries around, so if you're interested in how something tastes, she'll pull it off and slice off a piece
gosh.
for you. But what's really amazing is how beautiful vegetables and fruits can be when an artistic person stacks them up.
Picture perfect.
Yeah, I mean it's really sharp how
Rana
she has it.
studied art, drawing, and dance, and so she is. Yes.
Oh, yeah. She's always been the family artist. Yeah.
Okay, anything else we need to know about your marriage or your family?
We have 5 grandchildren.
Oh, that's worth mentioning.
Kathy has 2, Rana has 1, and Bobby has 2, but we don't get to see them because of the divorce.
Oh, gosh, divorce is really
Divorce is bad.
yes, it is. And unfortunately, it's something that plagues every family anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I want to thank you both for coming and joining us today. It's been a real delight having you here with us.
Right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
And I know you're proud of your parents, Sean.
Yeah, we're proud of our son. It's amazing how he brought his equipment and microphones in and turned the library into a sound studio. I mean,
Isn't it great? Yes. So, would you folks be willing to share with us some of the Baha'i readings? Be willing to intersperse some music with those? Oh, that is just great. So, okay, well, thanks again.
These manifestations of God have each a twofold station. One is the station of pure abstraction and essential unity. In this respect, if thou callest them all by one name, and doth ascribe to them the same attributes, thou hast not erred from the truth. Even as he hath revealed, no distinction do we make between any of his messengers. For they, one and all, summon the people of the earth to acknowledge the unity of God, and herald unto them the river of an infinite grace and bounty. They are all invested with the robe of prophethood, and are honored with the mantle of glory.
The other station is a station of distinction, and pertaineth to the world of creation, and to the limitation thereof. In this respect, each manifestation of God hath a distinct individuality, a definitely prescribed mission, a predestined revelation, and specially designated limitations. Each one of them is known by a different name, is characterized by a special attribute, fulfills a definite mission, and is entrusted with a particular revelation. Even as he saith, some of the apostles we have caused to excel over others. To some God hath spoken, some he hath raised and exalted. And to Jesus, Son of Mary, we gave manifest signs, and we strengthened him with the Holy Spirit.
The music on today's program were He Has Come Back and Ya Baha'u'llah Lapa by the House of Worship Choir. If you would like to learn more about the Baha'i community in the Champaign-Urbana area, or any of the activities we have mentioned today, you can visit our website at www.cu-bahai.org. If you would like to learn more about the Baha'i Faith, you may go to www.bahai.us. If you would like to contact the local Baha'i community in Champaign-Urbana, please visit our website at www.cu-bahai.org and click Contact. Thank you again for joining us today. I hope you'll join us again next month. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to this week's Weekend Heartbeat on WEFT Champaign 90.1 FM, Community Radio, Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, streaming live at www.weft.org.